Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this scrutiny panel meeting for this month. The fire alarm procedures are: if the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the office down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? Nope, and there's no members of the public, so we'll move on from that. I've had no request to speak under 20.1, so we'll move on from that, no public speaking. So move on to apologies for absence. I've got one apology, it's Councillor Cupp, who allegedly is going to be replaced by Linda Wright, but she's not here either. So any more apologies? Okay. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. And to approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 21st of May, a copy is attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Green, and a seconder, Councillor Britcher. Do all members agree? Okay, moving on to item 4, boat hoist replacement. I'll call on Tony Marmo to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out proposals for Cabinet approval to undertake the procurement and award of a contract to purchase a replacement boat hoist for Ramsgate Royal Harbour, and to delegate authority to the Director of Environment to agree the final terms and sign the contract with the successful bidder. The boat hoist is a key asset to Ramsgate Royal Harbour, generating an income of around £95,000 per year through its use and the boat hard standing area. The existing boat hoist at Ramsgate Royal Harbour is 30 years old and is showing signs of wear and tear. During the last Lola inspection, the boat hoist was downgraded to 32.5 tonnes instead of its original 40-tonne limit. The cost to restore the boat hoist to its 40-tonne capacity will be £67,000. Due to the age of the vehicle, keeping it in a suitable operational condition will incur large costs year on year, which are additional to the £67,000 which we would need to spend right now. These costs are not currently accounted for in the Ramsgate Royal Harbour budget. The Ramsgate Royal Harbour long-term tenants such as ESL Pilotage, the RNL lifeboats and the fishing fleet require the boat hoist to be able to lift more than 32.5 tonnes. And for this reason, they are travelling to other locations such as Dover for boat hoist and repair services. The cost of a new boat hoist is budgeted for as part of the £674,000 2024-25 budget in the Maritime Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Programme. The cost of a new machine is in the region of £260,000 to £300,000. This report requests that the Overview and Scrutiny Panel note and scrutinise the report and consider any representations it wishes to make to Cabinet in advance of the meeting on the 25th of June 2024.
Thank you, Tony. All seems fairly straightforward. Members, any questions? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Tony. The previous hoist was downgraded, and I understand there's limitations because of lack of space on the crosswall as to how large we can go. What's the actual tonnage that we're proposing for this new hoist?
Thank you. So Matt Kenny's here, and I'd just like to ask Matt to answer the question in terms of the maximum tonnage that he would be proposing.
Evening all. So we'll be looking at a replacement like for a 40-tonne, which is the biggest we could go with the size limitations of the crosswall. Yes, yeah. Yeah, it'll go back to a 40 tonnes, yeah.
Any further? Councillor Ring?
I think there'll be a lot of boat owners that will be really pleased that we're getting a new hoist. So it's been long overdue, I think. So thank you.
Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, just a quick one just to ask, has discussions taken place with insurance to make sure we're properly covering it, and is there a commitment that we're going to make sure we look after and implement any risk improvements that are suggested?
So the boat hoist is covered within our insurance, and when we have the new boat hoist, we would obviously put that under a planned preventative maintenance programme and schedule of servicing.
Councillor Austin?
Can I just recommend to any members or officers who haven't been and seen the boat hoist in action that it's absolutely fascinating and definitely worth a visit?
Thank you. Any further questions? So is there any recommendations we'd like to make to Cabinet? Are we all very happy? Can we all note the report then? Okay, thank you all. Moving on to item number 5, the Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground Pavilion. Now call on Tony again to introduce the report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The Council received a petition on the 30th of June 2023 relating to the Council's management of the public open space Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground. On the 14th of December 2023, Cabinet approved the next steps to be undertaken by officers in response to the petition. This included approving the demolition of the existing pavilion and the purchase of a temporary porta-cabin style changing facility once demolition has occurred. On the 28th of March 2024, Council agreed that a capital budget of £370,000 be allocated to facilitate this, and this budget is now available in the 2024-25 financial year. The existing pavilion built at Jackie Baker's Recreation Ground is dilapidated and presents a health and safety risk. It is beyond economical repair and is currently fenced off to prevent unforced access to the perimeter of the building. This report sets out the proposals for Cabinet approval to undertake the procurement and award of contract to demolish the existing pavilion, build a temporary changing facility, and to delegate authority to the Director of Environment to agree the final terms and sign the contract with the successful bidder. A REBA Stage 2 cost plan undertaken by consultants B&M has established the value of the contract is likely to be £360,000. B&M have also undertaken building and services surveys and produced a contract specification for competitive tendering based on the plans and designs they have also produced. Planning prior approval for the demolition of the existing pavilion was granted at the Planning Committee held on the 13th of December 2023. A further application for planning permission to erect the temporary pavilion has been submitted in early May 2024. The report requests that the Overview and Scrutiny Panel note and scrutinise the report and consider any representations it wishes made to Cabinet in advance of its meeting on the 25th of June.
Thank you, Tony. Members, any questions or comments you'd like to make? Councillor Scobie?
I have quite a few, Chair. And I want to start with a positive, which is to thank Mr. Marmo for all the work he's done. And some of these questions he's already answered in meetings we've had, but the minutes we had from the meeting, which I think was 8 weeks ago, we still haven't got a copy of that. So one of the issues we've had with this whole process is communication. So I just want to get some of this documented just so we can share with residents. This is clearly another big step forwards, and I think it's testament to Council sort of responding to a petition and doing some really positive stuff. A couple of questions I've got is just around the existing building, because what concerns me, there's been a couple of really serious health and safety issues in the last few months, and the Council has responded to this building, you know, potentially containing hazardous materials, and has closed it. Right thing to do. Council is now seen that the wall is bowing, so it's fenced off. Right thing to do. But I wonder whether there's any ongoing liability on this, because a year ago, as a councillor, I was shown around the changing rooms by a member of TDC staff and volunteers, and they were still being used a year ago. And when this got flagged up, it immediately got closed. And I just wonder whether somebody needs to start asking the questions as to how long that case was being used, that we knew there was hazardous material in there and the roof was damaged, but people were still using the asset. And secondly, for months, I would say, children have been on that roof and potentially could have got hurt. Even now, people are using the fence to get up onto the roof. I just want to make sure and understand from the council's perspective that we're confident there's not a liability and another potential health and safety issue that we're going to uncover in the future based on the fact that people were still using this pavilion that we're now saying is so potentially dangerous that we're going to demolish it quickly and that kids are still getting up there. So that's the first sort of line of questioning, Chair, if that's all right. I'd just like some response on that, please.
So from the point of view of closing the building, as soon as scenarios have become aware to me, I've taken the steps required to make sure that the health and safety of people comes first, and we've closed the building. As soon as we were shown that there was bowing from our inspections, we then put the perimeter in. We've put signage in to make it very clear to people that the building is dangerous and that they shouldn't go near the building. By providing locked gates and signage, we have guidance that covers us in terms of liability. We have taken the steps that we need to take to make sure that people are aware. We also have staff that are going there daily to check the facilities to make sure that no one's gone inside the perimeter fence or broken the locks, etc., etc. So it's being checked daily as a building. So we are covering all the things that we were advised to do to cover our liability.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you mind, or do you want others to come in, or are you happy for me to? Yeah, so thank you very much for that. Can I ask a question? How temporary is this temporary structure? Because obviously this structure is a big step forwards from what's there at the moment, which is unusable. But there are 14 teams that generally use that, and these changing rooms will be enough for 4, which is good. But if we want to make this available as we have under our local plan for it to be the sports ground for Thanet, if we want to bring tournaments here, if we want to make sure that we're getting revenue from this space, there needs to be something more there. Otherwise, the cynic in me thinks if you put a temporary structure there and the temporary structure could last for 20 years, the impetus to do something about it goes, and the community may be looking at a temporary structure in a decade again. So how temporary is temporary?
So the structure under planning permission would be allowed to be there for 2 years, and then we would have to, if it was to stay there, it would need to be reapplied for another 2 years. What we're doing currently is putting together a project plan for the bigger project, the master planning project. Happy to pass that over to Mr. Porter if you'd like to answer, but we are currently putting a plan together for the master project and to move that forward as quickly as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So you may recall that we took a master plan document to Cabinet a while back to set out the ambition for Jackie Baker's. That ambition hasn't changed, and we're still working towards finding ways to deliver that master plan. I think at the time when it went to Cabinet, we made the point that it wasn't at that stage funded, but there is a lot of external funding opportunities to bring towards sports pitches and sports facilities, and we're working with those external organisations, particularly Active Kent and Kent Football Foundation, to bring some of that together. There's some funding coming through Section 106 agreements for recreation facilities from developments in and around Jackie Baker's, and that money is earmarked towards that master plan as well. And so what we're doing effectively is working to put together a mixed blend of funding to be able to deliver those long-term ambitions. I don't think we can give a timescale to that at the moment, but clearly from the report that went to Cabinet and the commitment from Cabinet is there to see that master plan delivered once we can resource it. So hopefully that gives some reassurance that we're still working on that.
And if I may, Chair, just one more on that vein. One of the things that I think we're quite proud of that we get is some of the Kent Cup matches. And one of the things we discussed, Mr. Marmo, was potentially if this structure is going to take time to get in place, which, let's face it, it's local government, so everything takes longer than it probably should, which is completely understandable. Whether those matches with the coming season, where we could provide some, just for a weekend or two, some additional facilities there, just to make sure that if 14 teams are coming down for a weekend to do a load of matches as part of the Kent Cup, it would be a shame if we couldn't, just because of this one-off, provide something temporary, because we could just lose those matches completely and Thanet teams would have to go elsewhere.
So happy to have discussions with the Kent FA to see what we can do. I think that we can take that up at our next meeting with them and see where we can get to. We've got enough time to do that now, so if we start having those conversations now, we should be able to do something. Obviously, we need to work out how that gets funded and paid for.
Councillor Green?
There's been problems in the past with the adequacy of the building, in the sense that it was difficult sometimes to separate males and females, adults and children. Will the new temporary building have the capacity to do that?
So the new temporary building is 4 changing rooms. So depending on the scenarios that are on the day of the matches, obviously they can all be dedicated to one team each, or we'd have to time when teams were going in to get changed and etc. But clearly, providing 14 changing rooms for a temporary facility would be a massive undertaking. So at this stage, we're only able to provide 4 changing rooms with the money that we've got available to do that. There's also male and female toilets, and there's also 2 changing facilities for officials. So we will do the best we can with what we're providing.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, Tony. And to all, I just wanted to note and thank you for the intention to have the interim arrangement, because that's, I think, very important for the kids and the various organisations that already use it. And when it was sadly announced that we need to demolish what was there, there wasn't a plan. So thank you for bringing that into the plan. I think it's particularly relevant as well because one of the resident support groups, as I've seen today on social media, have got funding from Pitch Power to support the maintenance and development of the pitches. So obviously if they're bringing that in, it's even better that we're supporting them. So just wanted to note that and thank you for the development.
If I could just come in on Pitch Power, because it's quite an important statement. So our Open Spaces manager has been leading on Pitch Power. He instigated the assessments with the Kent FA. The actual funding for the works, once the assessments have happened, can only be applied for by community groups or football organisations. So he's also then worked with those community groups to start working on the grant applications and getting that funding through. So hopefully we're showing there that the council is working in partnership really well, and that's been quite a successful project for our Open Spaces manager.
In which case, take my earlier comment and we'll put a turbo or steroids on it, because that really does show developing the thought and the idea. So again, thanks to all.
Any further questions? Councillor Wing.
Sorry, anything that is going to improve facilities for our young people is going to get massive support from me, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to ask some questions. And I was going to ask, did we actually cost the repairs to the old building? But as soon as you mentioned dodgy materials, then I thought, no, I'm not even going to ask that question because it just needs to be demolished. I have been and looked at that site, and I think when it was first built, it would have been a fabulous facility. My school built one like that, and one of the key things in having a facility that big is how you protect it. That was my responsibility as Director of Specialism, and we had a fence around it, so it was more protected. So, and that all-weather pitch is in a seriously bad condition, in my opinion. Nobody should be using it, and that should also be sectioned off as well, and funding sought to replace that. But what I wanted to say is there's quite a few teachers here, and the worst thing you want to see arriving on your school site is a temporary porter cabin, because you know the likelihood is you're not going to be able to keep it safe, you're not going to be able to stop people breaking in, and eventually there will be some sort of fire in it, because that seems to be what happens when you have temporary buildings. So my real worry would be spending 370,000 on a building that we can't protect because there's no physical gate around it or fence around it, and that will not be as sturdy as a brick built building. So I'm just a bit worried that we could end up with a building that a year down the line becomes unusable as well, and we would have wasted that money. I don't know how we deal with that. So that's my first question: how do we make that sure that building is safe and secure once nobody's there?
So we're currently discussing whether to retain the existing fencing that has actually gone in. It's a discussion that we'll have with the community and partners to make sure we're making the right decisions on that. I think the second thing is that the temporary facility sort of suggests a sort of classroom style facility which is not of the strongest material. That's not what we're going for. What we're going for is something better than that in terms of vandal proof. Obviously, from the point of view of temporary, it's temporary because it's there for a short period of time. It is an off-site construction building and can be utilised in other areas. So we would imagine once the bigger projects happened, we would then reutilise the building. I think the key thing for us is that our staff who are currently checking the building more often, it might be that becomes something we need to do for permanency. We don't want the building to be damaged. The second thing that we need to do is just have a look at what the lighting is doing there. But it's always a difficult situation in a open space that probably doesn't have much lighting, at night doesn't have much footfall. So it is always a bit of a challenge, but we will look at those steps that we can take.
Well, really, and I'm going to ask about toilets, how many toilets inside, but that's a quick question later on. But moving forward, that site is, like you said, pretty isolated. And moving forward, once we start generating the bigger picture, one of the ways to secure that site, which is the way we looked at things on our school site, was to actually have an operator or a joint partner. We had a joint partner. So we had a partner that actually shared our facilities. It was a local rugby club, and that ensured that when we weren't there, that there was somebody using the site for a fee, and that it was protected in the hours that the school wasn't open. We have a fantastic football club, Ramsgate Football Club, who I understand have that many young people that they need other sites to practice on. So have we considered going forward on how we're going to have a joint operator or a joint partner so that we can make sure the facility is protected for a longer period of time and utilised as much as it can be?
So I was going to pick up actually on the 3G pitch scenario. So one of the things that Kent FA and the Football Foundation have identified is that there's the need for 2 more 3G pitches in the area, and one of those is at Jackie Baker's. So all the various little elements of what we put together in the master plan and the new project, once we've consulted, of course, will help to create more footfall. And it will help to create more people using the area. If we have something that creates more people using the area, then we're more likely to attract some form of operator or concession. If we are able to do that, then we would definitely consider that, because it means there is an operator there at more times than our staff could ever be. In the end, it is an open public space, and even though the operator will be there, they will shut the building at a certain point in time and it will still be exposed. So the challenge is always going to be there, but if we can reduce the number of hours that the challenge is there, that's always a positive.
And my last question is about, does the 370,000 include a connection to services, and how many toilets will there be in the change room area? Obviously, even 2 football teams generates an awful lot of wee.
yeah, I can help with that purely because I've got the drawing open in my. So yes, it will be connected to services. There's a male and a female toilet, sort of with external door, so accessible to all. There's an accessible toilet as well, so a separate accessible toilet. Each of the 4 changing rooms has its own toilet, and the 2 referee changing rooms have their own toilet. So, in summary, there's plenty of toilets. Yeah.
So just to confirm, the existing services will be used. So yeah, it's all included.
Okay, all done. Just one quick question, Tony. So, sorry, Will, do you want? I was just going to ask, when will the temporary change rooms be ready? Obviously, the football season, I think, starts first week in September.
That's the golden question. And I have to be honest, I don't have an answer until we've got confirmed planning permission. And obviously, we've put the planning application in, so we've got to have that go through the planning system. And if we get a positive response, then great, we've got a better chance. And then the next stage, of course, is the procurement exercise. So it's not going to be ready for the new football season. We have already confirmed that. So we will have to put in place temporary arrangements similar to what we've done this year. But we are working as fast as we possibly can. I can't really give you a timescale on when it will be ready.
Okay, fair comment. Also, obviously, you must have looked at different designs of temporary buildings. What sort of lifespan do these have? I mean, it's in place for more than 2 years. Are these modular buildings? What sort of wear and tear and things like that?
The buildings themselves have a good lifespan, and they can last as long as they need to. The big problem is as already identified, the lifespan is really how well people don't beat it up and vandalise it. And typically with football change rooms, sadly, they do have disgruntled football people that go into them and have a moment. So in terms of the facility, as I said, it's not a temporary structure, it's an off-site constructed structure. So it would have the same length of time as a normal building would, but it's going to be subject to what people end up doing to it.
Sure, and suppose that there would be the less damage, there would be a more resaleable value at the end, I presume.
Yeah, and I think it will be actually a facility that we could use somewhere else.
Well.
Yeah, I was just going to add a comment following on from Councillor Wing's questions, just saying one of the thoughts behind this is that with all the new housing going in around Hayne Road and New Hayne Road, actually there will be a lot more footfall going through there, which is in a way positive because it means that there will be more people going past it, but at the moment there is no lighting in that site at the moment, and it's something we're hoping that maybe our colleagues in Ramsgate Town Council may help, or we may have to look for grants for looking at that, but that's certainly a consideration that we're pushing for, that you're going to have a lot more people going through there, and from a safety security perspective for people as well as the building, we've got to make sure it's lit.
Okay. So there's a couple of recommendations that we're asked to look at. Firstly is to approve the funding to demolish the pavilion and provide the temporary port cabin style changing facilities. Do we all agree with that? Okay, and the second one is that the Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Environment to agree the final terms and sign the contract with the successful bidder. Do we all agree with that? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tony. Okay, moving on to item number 6, the extension of the Alcohol Public Space Protection Order. A call on Penny Button.
Thank you very much. Just before I start, councillors, I would just like to apologise for the fact that 2.5 is a repeat of 2.1, I think it is. So apologies for the error in the report. I'll get that out of the way first. So we're here to talk about the proposal for a public space protection order that combines our current antisocial, I'm going to use PSPO, and our current alcohol PSPO. We've undertaken a consultation where we have asked the public whether they are happy for them to be combined, and also to extend the area that they cover to the whole of the district, because previously they were specific to urban areas. The alcohol one was, so want to expand it to the whole of the district, and also include a section around harmful and degrading related activity, which is around how people are spoken to. So I would ask the Overview and Scrutiny Panel for their comments on the report and for their recommendations to Cabinet. The recommendations that we're asking for Cabinet to agree are to agree the combined public space protection order and also to delegate authority to the Chief Exec for any minor amendments or extensions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for your report, Penny. I'm going to outline a list of concerns that I've been contacted this afternoon by a number of people, but not least the Free Speech Union, who have raised some issues with the content and not necessarily the aim of this legislation. As a result of those conversations, I've got one or two concerns, which I'll also share with the committee. However, if I can outline what their concerns as expressed to me this afternoon were, they revolve around the expansion of what defines hate speech, because we're not defining, we mention harassment or harassment, whichever you choose to say, and distress. By not defining what the threshold for harassment or what is distress, it leaves us open to all sorts of challenges to whether somebody's approach to somebody else was appropriate or not. And I believe, and there are real concerns about causing a real logjam, if you like, in terms of challenged, if anybody was actually charged under this with challenges. They've asked me to express that very strongly, and I do see that that's a potential issue. There's also a question as to the lack of evidence in that, is there an increase in crimes of this type in the area, or are there hotspots identified? Because the police reports that we've had have been identifying falling crime rates, and in the absence of the right supporting evidence, the Act doesn't allow just for an indiscriminate application of it. So justification is being questioned here. The council do have an express duty to protect the freedom of speech of the individual, or indeed anyone's right to protest within the law, and without defining what these what constitutes those issues, then believe this is flawed, and I am told that it would be legally challenged by outside bodies. I believe that what we need to do perhaps is revisit the antisocial behaviour side of this before it actually goes through and becomes a thorn in our flesh and a millstone round our neck.
Thank you. Can I clarify that you're talking about point 7, which is the inappropriate, harmful and degrading related activity? That's the new aspect. The rest is already in place?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's, as I say, so, but it does relate to, I think it was 3.1, and I know the wording has been in place, but it's an unintended consequence, I'm sure. But
so the definition of harassment, alarm and distress, combining them all together there, is defined within the legislation, so I can pull that out. And this is around the violence against women and girls agenda. So we have a commitment, we have a violence against women and girls strategy that has been agreed through the correct channels, and this is around inappropriate, as it says, approaching women in an area, making comments, inappropriate sexual comments, asking if they're for hire, that kind of thing. We're not talking about protesting and free speech here. We're talking about very specific things that could be classed as abusive or would cause harm, harassment, alarm or distress.
No, thank you, Penny, and I fully understand that, by the way, and obviously would support anything that would protect the vulnerable. However, as I say, has there been an increase in reported instances of this, or is there, because I'd hate for this to be in place and to be legally challenged at great cost to the council, which is part of the reason I'm raising it now, because there is that risk factor that the council could end up locked up in ongoing litigation over a legal point that we could avoid.
So in terms of, I haven't got the stats in front of me in terms of the incidents specifically to women, but obviously because there has been an increase over time around that, violence against women and girls is a major issue, both for Kent Police and obviously for us under the strategy. So in that respect, it is something that we are focusing on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As I say, I want to make it quite clear, in no way am I trying to undermine any attempts to protect anybody that's vulnerable, but these legal concerns have been raised. I've raised them here. I don't know if there's any way we can maintain that momentum towards protecting them whilst taking a breather on that legislation in order to protect the council's interests.
If you just hold that thought until we get to the end, maybe a recommendation you want to put forward to Cabinet, I don't know. Councillor Green.
Yeah. Could you rehearse the argument for increasing the area covered? And will that result in less resource being available for hotspots?
No, it won't result in less resource being available. The issue with, and it's around the alcohol PSPO, alcohol side of it currently only is around the urban areas, so we want to extend that because it covers in some of the villages that we know we have problems with.
You have evidence of problems in the villages?
Yes.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I think this follows on from Councillor Green's question, which is about, it says here, an authorised person may issue a fixed penalty notice to anyone they have reason to believe, etc., etc. Who is an authorised person? Who have we got actually enforcing this? Because, you know, speaking as a ward councillor for what we referred to as Street Drinkers Central, we don't see much action from the police. We see the police going past and past and past and past and nothing happening. So are our own officers going to be empowered to do a bit more about this, to do some support, some education, and hopefully maybe some moving people on? Moving people on don't mean necessarily physically to the next place. I mean moving them on into better situations so that we can help them to get out of this lifestyle that's causing so much difficulty for them and everybody else.
So we do already undertake a lot of that work, so that will continue. Our officers are able to serve fixed penalty notices as well as the police. The difficulty is around intrinsic street drinkers, and there is work that happens in specific areas regarding that. So we have an ongoing thing at the moment with an issue in one part of Thanet, so there is stuff that happens, but it is very difficult in terms of using this piece of legislation for it.
Thanks, Penny. I mean, obviously, one of the things we're worried about in Ramsgate is we're approaching the tourist season and we have more or less permanently resident street drinkers on the benches in the town centre, and not much seems to be happening. Now, there may be lots of great stuff happening behind the scenes, but residents are getting worried. There are lots of times of the day when residents aren't comfortable about going through there. But even, you know, in broad daylight, it's not necessarily a comfortable place to be, and we've got people who've got really serious health, physical and mental health problems there who need our help and are obviously resisting getting any help, and none of us know what to do about it.
Unfortunately, we can't make people engage if they don't want to engage. We do absolutely try. We work very much with the RISE team around those that are perhaps shown as homeless as well. We do everything we can to try and engage people. If they don't want to engage, then we do have a difficulty with that. And I will make sure that the specific areas around Ramsgate are raised with the team as well.
In regard to that, when she asked who are the specific officers that can give out the FPNs, are we talking about the same people that give the parking tickets out, or is there another group of people that I'm unaware of? So
yes, it's the community team that can deal with this aspect, and the police are the biggest ones that would be doing that work.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Do KCC still have village wardens, or are they gone along with everything else? And if so, will they be empowered?
No, we don't empower them to undertake this work. KCC wardens don't have any enforcement powers. I don't know where they are located, but there are still some KCC wardens. But off the top of my head, I don't know where they are exactly.
Will?
Just clarify to Councillor Davis, did you mention the Free Speech Union had been on the phone to you? Okay, just for balance and not to make this too political, the Free Speech Union is Toby Young's organisation. So with their whole thing is to get rid of a woke culture. He's had lots of issues getting in trouble for saying, denying COVID, and also got in trouble a long time ago for talking about progressive eugenics, that movements forward in technology will allow technology to help underprivileged families to have their kids potentially euthanized or something like that. I mean, there's a whole thing there. So just for balance, I think there's
absolutely. But hang on,
if I may, Chair, just through you, my point is, it's fine for us as councillors to bring organisations in as reference points, but I do think we need to be fair that some organisation saying the name Free Speech Union probably makes people go, oh, that's an organisation that we may want to listen to it, and people might want to, that may be an organisation you like, Councillor Davis, but I do think we need to be quite open about what that organisation potentially is, and it's not necessarily something that I personally would be holding much weight with.
But from what I know about the Free Speech Union, I think they're looking all around the country at councils bringing in PSPOs and how they restrict people's freedom of speech, etc. That's from what I gather and what I've heard. You probably know more about it than I do, but yeah. Councillor Peckman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to be clear that number 7, the inappropriate, harmful and degrading related activity around the women and children, does not replace any other enforcement. So we're not saying that this is going to be, oh, it's a £60 fine and that's the end of it. There is hopefully further investigation if there's any sexual related activity towards women and children.
Yeah, so it doesn't replace anything else. It's just an additional tool that people can use.
Chair, just to come back to Councillor Scobie and confirm, I'm not here representing the Free Speech Union. They contacted me this afternoon, raising issues. I believe they would have come to me because I'm known for speaking out on various issues, which a badge I wear with pride. However, we're not here, we are here purely on an overview and scrutiny basis. There's no politics involved. I can't comment on Toby Young's opinions. Some of them are very entertaining, some of them I may not disagree with, or may not agree with myself. But the issues that were raised by their lawyers are very real, and I think we need to take into account in order to avoid unnecessary risk. Thank you.
Thank you. I do actually keep an eye on the crime figures in Central Harbour, and I've just put my postcode in. And in April, that's the last reporting date, there were 111 crimes, and 50% of them were violence and sexual offences, and that's invariably the nature of crime in Central Harbour. It's gone down, but it's going back up. I mean, pre-COVID, we were looking at 300 crimes a month. I do check them every month. So I actually welcome the fact that you're going to introduce that, and it is a low level, is picking up, stuff that could escalate into something else, and quite rightly, Councillor Packman's picked up that can't be replaced. So I really welcome the fact that that's in there, because clearly the evidence of crime figures, and you can all put your postcode in, see how safe it is right there. But the issue I have is the enforcement side of it. So, and I know this is a joint police. It's how we talk. It's how we engage together. Interestingly, I think we have to look at other things, because I went down to the market on Friday. Thank you to everybody who got that market back. And the street drinkers had been pushed out of the town centre because the market was there. So I think we not only do we need to look at enforcement, we've got to look at filling our town centres with other activities, which actually pushes the street drinkers out. But what I found quite ridiculous is I think there were 3 policemen. I don't think we had any of our own enforcement there. There were at least 3 policemen and 2 PSPOs. And a scooter went up the main road through the market, and not one policeman did anything to stop that motorcyclist. From a meeting, I was at a meeting on Monday night a week ago, and I walked back through town at 7:30 at night, and there were 15 or 16 street drinkers creating noise, throwing their cans about in our town centre. So the thing that I worry about as a school teacher is if you introduce a rule and you don't enforce it, those few people that we have in our community that break rules actually think they can break all rules. So I absolutely welcome this, but I think we've got to find a way of working together, and that sort of residents, councillors, the enforcement team and the police to try and deal with this problem. But I welcome the additional bit about sexual behaviours, inappropriate sexual behaviours and conversations towards women and children. So I do welcome that.
Okay, Councillor Pope.
Thank you. I was just wondering about the comments, sexual comments towards women and inappropriate behaviour towards women. Is there any preventative measures that are planned? Because obviously, as we've been discussing, capacity is a huge issue, and prevention is better than stopping something after it's done.
Yeah, so we have a strategy that's been adopted around that has lots of preventative issues in it, preventative items in it with actions. Thank you. Sorry, it's been a long day for me today. So they have lots in there that they're looking at doing that we already do. So we do some work around This Girl Can. We're doing an innovative piece of work around how we can use technology to try and educate people around the impact of their words on people. So whilst it's focusing on violence against women and girls, we'll be able to use it in other aspects as well. So yeah, there's lots of things happening and planned to happen over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we all welcome PSPO being extended to the whole of Thanet. Once again, it's all about implementation. And I was thinking, how many officers have we actually got in the community team? And are there any plans to take on extra officers during the summer months? And also, when the police superintendent was here, he was talking about extra officers. I wonder if we've heard anything in that area. Thank you.
So yeah, we don't intend to employ any extra officers. We currently have 5 in the team, plus the manager, and they deal with all aspects of community work, so it isn't just around enforcement. They do all of the community development, sports development as well. In terms of the policing, I know that they were looking for extra officers. I'm under the impression that they have got them in because they've got a policing plan in place for the summer, but I can't categorically say that. I will find out and confirm for you.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, thank you. I welcome point 7. I think it's absolutely vital that inappropriate and harmful and degrading related activity is an offence. But what I'm worried about is that people don't know that it's an offence, and if people are subject to harassment or if anything causes them alarm and distress, then how will they know to report it? I think this is the problem with certainly women experiencing harassment far too frequently. They don't report it because they don't think it's a crime, and it is normalised, and people think that it's normalised. How are we communicating that now we're not going to tolerate it? Thank you.
So off the back of this, there will be communication specifically around the area, but also around the PSPO as a whole, reminding people of what the restrictions are, particularly around antisocial behaviour and alcohol. So it will be picked up as part of that, and we will look at it as a specific area. The one thing I also wanted to say, if I can quickly come in on the enforcement, is I completely forgot the beach and coast enforcement officers that can also enforce this during the summer months. Escaped my mind, sorry.
Is there any work planned with schools? Are we going to go into schools and speak to them about these points? Thank you.
I don't know the exact detail, but I'll find out. Unfortunately, Joanna was unable to make it this evening. He's obviously leading on this, but I will find out the exact how they're going to go out with it.
Councillor Patman.
Thank you. Is this intelligence-led as well? So if a constant report is being reported to TDC or to the police, can this be enforced retrospectively for their behaviour? So if we constantly, as councillors, tell people to report things, can this be an avenue that the police or the TDC can enforce after something has happened?
No, but we would use other pieces of legislation like community protection warning notices, which is the sort of thing we do if it's something that's continuous and ongoing.
And sorry, Chair. And does the warning notice carry the same weight as a PSPO enforcement fine?
Carries slightly different weight. So it's under the same piece of legislation, but you issue a community protection warning notice which advises people on their behaviour. So it says what they should and what they shouldn't be doing normally, or how they should behave. And then if they breach that, it's community protection notice, and then it goes on to court and fines. So it's just a slightly longer process, whereas this is instant if it's witnessed.
Thank you.
Councillor Faruqi.
Thanks very much. And I completely welcome Section 7, and I think I think it's very unlikely there will be any legal challenge for stating that people should not be abusive in public. I think that is highly unlikely to happen. May I just ask, what is the burden of proof for the penalty? Because it says reason to believe, and that it leaves it very, very open. I believe probably, albeit deliberately while you're working it out. But what's your thoughts?
So it's around behaviour. So in terms of antisocial behaviour, the reason to believe is around likelihood of something happening with a group of people. But it's actually, if we witness it happening, then we would be doing serving notice.
So would someone, in order to actually create that reason to believe, would people need to film things on their phones? How would they actually ensure that they're,
So it would be whilst the officers are on site. So it wouldn't. This isn't something we can do retrospectively. It's something we're doing whilst we witness it. So when they're out and about, particularly evening time, is when the police are more likely to use that aspect of it.
Okay, Councillor Davis.
That concerns me a little in that obviously I welcome the fact that it's not just randomly and retrospectively applicable, because that's one of the concerns about anybody could raise and point a finger and that, where are we with things, because however, if it's only in the presence of an officer, only, we're obviously addressing the fact, and again, it's very wrong if women or anybody's being abused by people enjoying the nighttime industries, let's say, which is obviously where there is a surge in that type of behaviour and accusation. But again, this comes back, and again, following up on my colleagues on my right's comments about the same old faces reappearing in town centres, the street drinkers. It raises this issue again of the indiscriminate blanket application of legislation. What is it hoping to achieve? Because it's not going to achieve anything, and particularly unless the officers are present and witness this in this instance. Therefore, I think it's a flawed application, which, as I said, not my words, but if people are looking at challenging it legally, then we have to look at that cost risk to the council against what we hope to benefit from this. And I'm actually not sure what it is. Last time I looked, soliciting was a criminal offence. So therefore, if an officer witnesses somebody attempting to solicit, surely they can then be arrested and charged for that under criminal legislation by the police. As I say, I'm not trying to take anything away from laudable aims here, but I just don't see how this works without being, without further refinement.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just respond and make a general point? We've used public space protection orders since shortly after the legislation came in, which is the ASB Crime and Policing Act in 2014. So this is, I think, certainly the second, possibly the third iteration of the PSPO. It absolutely isn't there to try and stifle freedom of speech. That's not what it's there for. It wouldn't be used for those purposes. It is there to make sure that we have powers when ASB occurs, when people feel intimidated walking down the street, when street drinkers, people acting in a way that makes people feel scared or intimidated. That is the time that we use it, and without those tools, we wouldn't have the powers to be able to intervene in those situations. So I just wanted to make the point that having a PSPO in place, and this PSPO will combine alcohol and antisocial behaviour. We have other PSPO in place around activities that or around offences that occur on the coastline. these are tools, these are the mechanism by which we can, have some teeth, have some powers. That's what it's about. Freedom of speech, certainly it shouldn't be and it wouldn't be abused to try to interfere with that.
Thanks, Mike.
I just wanted I do think that the PSPO areas are a good idea. It's a bit like a speeding fine, isn't it? And I've had one or two in my time as a younger person, and certainly that stopped me from that behaviour. It's not that I regularly speed. I just got caught on a 30 mile doing 36, and that's wrong, and that checked my behaviour. So I see these as generally checking people's behaviour. The street drinkers are a more complicated, as we know, a more complicated issue. But I just wondered, in that sense of checking people's behaviour, whether we signpost people to services to have a better understanding, or I'm a massive supporter of restorative justice, so bringing the two parties together so that the person that's been abused can explain to the person that's abused them how it made them feel. And that's had, particularly with young people, has had a massive positive impact on both parties.
So we do restorative justice, or the police do restorative justice, obviously working with us on bigger cases. When it comes to these sorts of incidents, it's normally not appropriate in the situations, so they're working quite dynamically. But I will definitely feed that back as something that is worth considering in future.
Councillor Scobie.
I was going to say, I think we're getting there anyway, but I think everybody's had their say, so I'd like to move a motion 16.1H, then we move to the next item of business, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. So, I was going to say we'd move on. So, members are asked to scrutinise and note the report. So, have we got any recommendations you want to take to Cabinet? Councillor Green?
I would like us to raise with Cabinet our concerns about the resourcing of this.
Enforcement,
and whether the expansion is justified when we can't resource the activities in the hotspot areas.
So Councillor Green's proposing that. Does anybody want to second that? Councillor Wing's going to second that. So have you got that, Charles? Yeah. Concerns around enforcement and justifying the expansion without enforcement.
Chair, just on that, we haven't voted on it yet. I think hasn't the officer sort of answered some of those queries. I'm not quite sure what recommending to Cabinet will do. So having gone to, I know yourself, you go to Cabinet as well. The way these meetings are set up, this won't be on the agenda for Cabinet. We've asked the officer. I'm assuming you as chair of Overview and Scrutiny will go. I'm not sure what. Maybe this is a point for a new member of Overview and Scrutiny. I'm not really sure where these recommendations go. So we make this recommendation. Cabinet agenda's already been set. Where does that actually go?
So I think it is a justified point to put to Cabinet, because Cabinet agreed a budget going forward that if more enforcement is needed, surely that Cabinet need to agree that budget. So if we're making a recommendation to Cabinet for more enforcement officers, then they have to agree the budget.
Except we as councillors approved a budget with the amount of people, so we're almost like we've set a budget for the year for the amount of officers we've got. Then they're putting forward a plan of how they're going to use it, and the first thing we're saying is, well, you need to increase the budget. It's like, well, we've set the budget. Do you see what I mean? It's a circular process. We need to have that conversation at budget time, not midway through the year, because the Cabinet's just going to come back and say, well, we're set with this budget, but we'll bring it into next year's budget focus. And maybe that's what you're suggesting, Councillor Green.
That's why I propose. In terms of can they justify the expansion of the area when they haven't got the resource?
But plus this is is it 4 years? How long is it?
It's 3 years.
So it's for 3 years. So I mean, it's going to last through 3 budgets. So if we need more enforcement officers, then
I think it's important that we all remember our remit, which is to be the critical friend to Cabinet, and it's quite within our brief to, during a pre-scrutiny process, make recommendations for tweaks and modifications to Cabinet. That's the whole reason we're here. So,
If I could put it to Penny, do you believe that we need more enforcement officers?
That's a very loaded question, Chair.
Councillor Wing?
I mean, I see us as critical friends here, you know, and different lenses on what the Cabinet is bringing to us, which is a positive thing. And it's got to be a rolling process. We can't say we can't discuss that because the budget's already been approved. We have to make recommendations going forward, whether they can be achieved or not. And the Cabinet can just totally say we're not going to respond to your recommendation at all. But I certainly feel that, you know, same as Councillor Green, that if we're expanding this, we're sort of setting up our finite members of staff to fail, because the people of Thanet will expect every drunk to be dealt with by a team of five. So, you know, maybe Cabinet will say, maybe we need to suspend this for a year and introduce it in next year when we can double our staff in. That could be that could be something that Cabinet decides upon, because I do feel that the expectation for the people of Thanet is all crime will be eradicated, and that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah, I tell you, I mean, it was noted that there's a problem in the villages, and then, I mean, it's not something that coastal officers can deal with, and if we've only got a handful of officers, I mean, how are they going to spread themselves that far and wide? Sorry, Matt.
No worries. I was going to say, obviously Penny did say about coastal officers, and the way the coastal officers' job descriptions are written, they're not just on the coast all year round, they are redeployed elsewhere, so they are an additional capacity. With regards to the budget, Cabinet can't agree additional funds. So what you'd be doing is asking Cabinet to put forward a proposal to Council to agree additional funds. So what I think you'd be asking for is a review of resources if that's the road you want to go down, but Cabinet can't approve that. So just for clarification.
But Cabinet could look at it in the next budget cycle, because if this lasts for 3 years. So
we're entering the budget cycle now. That's where we are. You could ask for it to be put forward as a Star Chamber bid if it was costed up and if the resources required. I think it's difficult to say that the resources don't exist and there isn't sufficient capacity, because we've been managing this process in this way for since the legislation coming in 2014. So if there's a problem with resources, there's been a problem with resources since inception.
But yeah, it has, and this is an expansion, so yeah. So if there's expansion, so everything needs expenditure.
Point of order. Can we put the proposal to the vote and move on? And move on.
Do we all look? Sorry.
That's not how things work, you know. There's still a debate going on, as we found last time when we were debating this. The point I want to make is our job as scrutiny is to hold the Council's performance and Cabinet to account. But we're now changing the motion. The original motion was we want to ask Council to look at resources, and as Mr Sanham said, or I'm going to paraphrase slightly, Cabinet doesn't actually have the power to do that, and because we're mid-year, they can't do it yet anyway. So the reason I raise it is not that I disagree with the motion.
We're not asking Council to do anything.
No, but the reason I raise it is that we have to be very clear on our language on this. The idea that we are the first people in the Council that have thought about how they're going to implement this, when we have lots of brilliant officers, we have, in my opinion, a brilliant Cabinet, they will have thought these things through and will be worrying the same as us. So if we want to ask a question, we absolutely should, but it needs to be a little bit more focused on how the Council actually operates. And I would absolutely support a request that in years 2 and 3 of this implementation of the PSPO, that Cabinet, as part of the many things that they're going to be worrying about with the budget, that they try and look to put attention to. That makes sense to me. Just asking a blanket, we'd like more resource, just feels like a little bit of a wasted recommendation.
That wasn't what the motion said.
Can we go back to what the motion said then, to the clarity?
It was for Overview Scrutiny to express concerns around enforcement. Is that what you is? And how can we justify the expansion?
And whether the expansion is justified when we haven't got the resource.
But I don't agree with you when you say we're holding Cabinet to account on this. I mean, it's a Cabinet report, and we'll ask to look at it and make recommendations on this report. Not to be that critical about it, but ask to, if we conceive any that we need to make recommendations. So we have a proposed, sorry, Councillor Faruqi.
If possible, could we vote on that in parts? Because I agree that we would wish to, for Cabinet to consider the how this would be enforced, but I disagree that it should not be put forward because of that. I think it's an important thing to put forward. Whether or not we can resource it efficiently now hasn't yet been proven. It's an assumption, but we need to actually have no evidence on how much greater resource we will need until it's actually in place.
Okay, so the proposal from Councillor Green was to express concerns around enforcement and how can we justify why there is those concerns. So do we, and I had a seconder, do we all agree on that? Sorry, can we just have a show of hands?
I didn't think the motion. I added that bit, and it wasn't in the motion. But I think the motion was saying it wasn't saying suspend it at all. It was saying it was basically saying, do we have the resources, and does this justify moving forward? It wasn't saying should we move forward or should we not move forward, because I absolutely totally believe this should be moved forward. But I worry about its enforcement.
Yeah. The panel has concerns about resources for enforcing this new combined order, and is questioning the justification for this enforcement without adequate resources.
The expansion without adequate enforcement.
Does it cover what you?
Yeah, that's
It's, and Chair, I can't support that because I wouldn't. Yeah.
All those in favour of that proposal?
Chair, could I just confirm?
Can we just do the vote on that first?
I need to confirm the wording of the proposal.
Okay.
It's gone round the houses.
The panel has concerns about resources for enforcing this new combined PSPO and the justification for the enforcement, for the new enforcement without adequate resources. Can we?
Yeah.
Do you feel this reflects, or should we reword it?
Okay, all those in favour of that proposal, please raise your hands. Oh, okay, and all those against? Okay, so that proposal has fallen. Okay, so that's, any more recommendations anyone would like to make? No, okay, so there's no recommendations. Oh, Councillor Austin.
Can I just make some modification of Councillor Green's proposal to take the first part of that? Charles, do you mind reading out the first bit again? Just about the panel is concerned about.
The panel has concerns about resources for enforcing the new combined PSPO.
Okay, stop there.
Just that.
Okay, so that's your proposal. Do we all agree with that one? So we split it down, we just do the first one, that the overview and scrutiny expresses concerns about enforcement of this expansion of the PSPO. Do we all agree with that? Okay. Councillor.
Originally say that and does the evidence support the expansion, which was Councillor Green's original proposal?
That's fallen. It's fallen.
We all agree. Can we move on? Thank you, Penny. Okay, moving on to item 7. I call on Ashley to introduce the report on the purchase of homes at Phase 3, Spitfire Green, New Hayne Road for affordable rent.
Thank you. Council approved an accelerated affordable housing development of at least 400 new homes to be constructed or acquired by 2027. Officers are already working in partnership with BDW, which is Barrett's, on a number of sites, and they had contacted us regarding Phase 3 at Spitfire Green, New Hayne Road. Although they had made inquiries with other registered providers, no offers for the units had been received, and they were keen to maintain continuity throughout the site by working with us. These homes are anticipated to be EPC-B, and construction will start early next year. The capital cost for these 32 Section 106 affordable rented homes at Phase 3 Spitfire Green is just over £4 million, with £212,000 for associated costs. Paragraph 3.4 on your report shows that the proposed purchase would generate a cash flow deficit in year 1 of £43,813, with a break-even point in year 16, with surpluses accumulating between year 16 and year 50. The Council is being very proactive in its approach to what has been described as the market failure across the South East. Councils and developers from Kent, Essex and East Sussex have been discussing the difficulty in sourcing registered providers to take the affordable housing set aside in Section 106 allocations. Thanet is among those councils seizing the opportunity and stepping in. This is actually having multiple positive impacts, as it is ensuring affordable homes are not lost to the open market, providing homes that can not only let to those in housing register, but directly through the local lettings plans to those in temporary accommodation, and actually helping developers with their investments in our districts. However, the changes to the multiple dwelling relief for stamp duty tax that were announced in the spring 2024 budget have provided a further obstacle in our due diligence and viability test by a larger number of homes. The Council has written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to raise with them the concerns we have. Of course, we realise the rationale for bringing the measures was to prevent perceived abuse of the rules and speculative claims for relief, but increasing the amount of stamp duty we pay on large acquisitions has a significant potential to adversely hamper our attempts to deliver the positive outcomes listed above. As the homes have been designated as affordable homes in the planning consent and Section 106 agreement, they have been designed specifically for that purpose and accordingly are considered appropriate for the HRA in line with the needs of the households on the Council's register and for those living in temporary accommodation. There is a significant level of need for one-beds as well as larger family homes. The unit sizes and the mix of this specific dwellings are 18 one-beds and 14 two-beds. It is proposed that the new homes are let in accordance with the Council's adopted allocations policy. Members of Overview and Scrutiny Panel are asked to note and scrutinise the report and consider any representations to Cabinet in advance of its meeting on the 25th of June. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. We've had a few of these recently, so members' questions. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one typo to suggest be correct, one bit of wording that I'm unhappy about, and one question. So the typo is just that we've got the ward as Manston Villages, which should be Thanet Villages. It's in Manston, but it is Thanet Villages. The wording, and I'm delighted that I'm not the only pedant in the room this evening, because we've had examples of pedantry about our protocols and our terminology and what Cabinet can approve and what Council can approve. We have under consultation, we have also consulted with the Cabinet member. Strictly, you haven't consulted with the Cabinet member, you've taken instruction from the Cabinet member, haven't you? I know obviously you've advised her, etc., 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 but in terms of Council protocol, you don't consult with the Cabinet member, do you? That it works the other way. This is the report that you have put together on behalf of the Cabinet member, yes? Yeah? I'll leave that with you. My question is about... Yep?
It's my report, it's not the Cabinet member's report, so this is my report, so I have consulted with the Cabinet member.
But in protocol terms, surely... Sorry? Obviously you've consulted with the Cabinet member, but in protocol terms, the responsibility sits with Cabinet, doesn't it?
The responsibility to make a decision sits with Cabinet, but the report is an officer report. As with all reports, it's the officer report. I mean, I think what the report's saying is that in preparation of the report, the officer has consulted with the Cabinet member.
Yes, as obviously we'd expect. It's just a bit of pedantry about terminology, I think that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's clear that the report is the officer's
The officer report, yes, I'm not suggesting it's not.
with the officer
yeah.
recommendations
Yeah.
and the implications as drafted by the officers. But you're right, it's for the cabinet then to decide.
Yes, yeah. Okay, great, thank you. The question then is about, we're looking at the timescale starting with year one. When do we expect year one will actually be?
You've probably all been past Spitfire Green. They're actually cracking on. Phase 1's complete. They have actually, I think that what they're doing at the moment is phase 2, but I anticipate by the end of the year they'll be starting phase 3. So, yeah, that was why they're literally waiting on this to be approved, to be honest.
Councillor Scovey? Chair,
I may have gone down a bit of a blind alley in the question I'm about to ask, so I apologise if I'm taking us off. But this is the first time I've been on Overview and Scrutiny I've had one of these. Obviously, we as councillors approved the overall strategy and very supportive of all the work you're doing. But when I started digging into this, a lot of things didn't make sense to me. So first question I want to ask before I go off to make sure, is this, and this is probably to Mr. Sanham actually, so we're borrowing 4.25 million and then we're going to repay 202,445 per year. How long is that loan for? Is that over the 30 years that's referenced in the report?
So borrowing spread over the life of the asset, so it's 50 years.
50 years, okay. So I worked on the basis it was 30 years, and so if we were borrowing 4 million at that number, the actual repayment would be over 6 million, but if it's over 50 years, it's going to be more than that. What concerns me is there's a completely separate conversation that Councillor Green and I were having with officers about a concern that Councillor Green raised around right to buy. And the officer sent an email. It was a really, really good email, actually. But in the email, and it was just trying to get the name of the officer. Apologies. I think it was Clive.
Clive, yeah.
So within that email, and apologies, Chair, if you can just follow my logic here. He said that the concern with this project around right to buy is not really an issue, because of offsetting that can be done and floor prices, etc. And I sort of followed that. I don't really know enough about it. What he did say in the email, and I'll just read it, was that it's more likely, however, after year 15, when the initial property purchase value would fall away from the cost floor calculation, and a larger discount would therefore be received by the tenant. And this is in relation to the question of where's the risk for the council. So how does that tie that the risk from right to buy starts to come at 15 years, when in this report we're saying that the break-even point is at year 16, and even by that point, we, by the report suggestion, will have spent we would have a cash impact of over £500,000 by then. Are we opening ourselves up to the potential that there could be a risk exposure, not now for this council, not in 10 years, some of us may not be councillors or even work for the council anymore, but are we not creating an issue for the future potentially, and a risk for that period when, you know, we've hit our break-even point, but then that's potentially the biggest risk for us from right to buy? And when, just to take this further down this potential tangent, I tried to look at properties that would be of a similar location and potential value for this, and then try and work out, I mean, this is complete madness when I was on a train back from Manchester, but the properties that are similar to it, I looked at around Meridian Close, which is in Newington, which is not far from it, and a one-bed flat, a one-bedroom property at that similar to this would go for 115,000. A two-bed would go for 140. Under the rules around right to buy, that you can lose up to you can get up to a 70% discount. When you put that all together, if that happened at like year 15, from the numbers I was looking at with my little calculator tapping away, we could lose millions if it all happened. Now, I may be completely mad, Professor, going into, but just there was stuff in there that concerned me, and this may not be something that we're going to flesh out now, but I wanted to raise it as a point of concern.
I'm going to ask Matt to help me out with that. Have you got it?
Yeah, I'll start, Matt, and if you... I mean, I think the starting point is that right to buy does impact on the HRA business plan across the whole portfolio. So we've got 3,500 properties-ish with about 300 of those leaseholders and the rest are tenanted. And right to buy impacts negatively on the business plan. There's no doubt about that. And every time we do a right to buy sale, we lose that rent stream in the business plan. So we do get some of the receipt back. Some of the receipt is available to recycle into new homes. Some of it is available to offset debt against the whole portfolio, and some of it goes back to government. We have to make, in the HRA business plan across the board, we have to make prudent assumptions about the level of right to buy, and they're done by finance colleagues, and they're confirmed by external advisors on the HRA business plan. So we build into the plan assumptions about the numbers of right to buy sales across the whole portfolio. And obviously, and in the modelling for these projects as well, we make assumptions that there will be some right to buy sales. What is one thing that I think is probably really quite significant here is if you look at the numbers of right to buy sales that we've been completing, they are really quite low. And you know, the truth is that the economic conditions and the economic ability of our tenants to exercise the right to buy are factors in whether or not people choose to and are able to exercise their right to buy. The people that we are currently letting homes to predominantly would not be in the financial circumstances currently to exercise their right to buy. But you're right, that might change in the future. The point about 15 years is that there's a thing in the legislation called the cost floor. So if the right to buy is exercised at any point, any capital expenditure that's been incurred in the previous 15 years, the sale price, regardless of the discount, the sale price can't fall below the cost floor. So hence what Clive put in the note about we're protected for at least 15 years, that the sale price can't fall below what we've paid. So there are some safety measures in there. Any individual property, there's clearly a risk, but across the whole portfolio, we think the risk is manageable.
Anybody else? Councillor Wing?
I'd just like to say that I think we desperately need to increase our housing stock. It's the only way we're going to drive private rented accommodation down. You know, I've got a whole block on my street that have just been given notice to leave and nowhere, and they're going to create an issue for us. You know, an issue that we can't automatically find these people, some of whom are vulnerable, somewhere to live. So anything that increases the number of the amount of social housing is a big plus for me. We should be expanding it and doing it as much as we can, because that's the only thing that will drive down private rented accommodation, which has gone through the roof over the last 2 years and is totally unaffordable by most people that live and work in Thanet. It's good to know that the right to buy risk is low. So although it can be scary if everybody decides to buy their house, I'm hoping that it after May the 5th or June the 5th or whenever it is, it's all going, that we'll have people who will decide that right to buy needs to be scrapped because it's been extremely bad. But yeah, fully support it. We need as much social housing as possible. So thanks for putting this together, because it's clearly not an easy thing to do.
Thank you for the answer. I will keep trying to get my head round this. Just a riff off of that, so coming away from Mad Professor, back of a fag packet calculation that probably don't make any sense to anyone. Just stepping back to, you know, because it talks in the report around the model and the methodology. I'm interested, how do you factor in risk into your model? So like a lot of the industry benchmarking is to do stress testing. So to take what's in your risk register and the financial implications, and then model those scenarios into the future, and then look at layering risks, and then giving that to finance and saying, right, these are what we think the financial impact is going to be over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Can you model for us and show us how that operates? Because to your point, Councillor Wing, we absolutely have some serious problems we've got to solve in Thanet. But for me, my biggest worry for the council is what's happening elsewhere, which is Section 114 notices, where councils are trying to do good things or positive things to help their community. A mistake or error is made for probably with the best of intentions, and then what ends up happening is residents are left in a situation where political power is taken away from the council. There's massive service cuts. Now, clearly, having gone through governance and audit the last year, there is no major risk of that for Thanet, but we've got to be so vigilant of that. So I'm just interested, do you do stress testing of the HRA? And if not, is that something we can do? And just to add some, you maybe understand why I'm on this. I've just come back from a 3-day local government risk conference, and the session this morning was all around social housing and how you can stress test your budgets for the future. So you can see why this item may have fallen at a poor time in terms of my questioning.
No, I think it's fair. They're fair questions. We have done some stress testing, and the key variables in the business plan are interest rates and inflation. And so colleagues in finance have put together some scenarios looking at different impacts of inflation and interest rates on the long-term health of the HRA business plan. Obviously these reports are coming through with modelling based on current interest rates. I think when this report was done and Clive checked the interest rates, it was running at 4.8%. But obviously if at the point where we need to draw down borrowing, the interest rate is lower, then that helps that. But we have stress tested the whole plan with different interest rates and different inflation rates. And we've been through that with the cabinet as well. Probably one of the biggest risk areas is rent policy, and I think actually that's probably true across the whole of the affordable housing, social housing sector. And so our assumptions have been the current maximum rent increases, which are CPI plus 1% annually. But if there is change in national rent policy, then obviously that impacts. So you're right that those variables do make a difference, and we review the plan every year. We have external advisors to support us with the review of the plan, and in budget setting, all of that information comes to full council. So what assumptions we've made about interest rates, what the debt position is, and what our rent proposals are for the coming medium term. So that is reviewed every year as well. Do you think you want to add to that, Matt?
I was just going to add as well that from a reporting perspective, I think that the HRA in sort of totality, when you're talking about rents, came in under budget for the last financial year in comparison to what was anticipated. So HRA is unlike the general fund in that it doesn't have to set a balanced budget. It can run at a deficit based on the position, and as you know, one doesn't cross-subsidise the other, so an impact in the HRA doesn't mean we've got to look for savings in the general fund, which means it doesn't mean it's going to impact on service delivery for our residents. It will impact on how we deliver the business plan moving forward, but because it can run at a deficit, there's an opportunity to claw that back that otherwise wouldn't exist if it was a general fund issue. So I think it's worth kind of pointing that out. There was another point I was going to make and I've completely lost my train of thought. Sorry.
And just as a follow-up to that, do you, when you're looking at these project risks, do you look at the fund as a whole and how it all feeds together? So, for example, the impact at the moment of homelessness and the cash impact that's potentially going to have on the council, that's a different budget. Okay, so say, for example, there was something else within the HRA budget, then the layering of risk is where I worry about stuff. And when you're looking at these projects, so if you've got two social housing provider, housing association come forward with stock, and you don't have the budget for both, how do you choose that? Do you use net present value or a different type of methodology to decide which one to go with?
We haven't really been in that position so far. I think if we got to the point where, you know, the ability of the business plan to support new projects was, you know, kind of, we were getting to the end of that, and it was limited scope, we would clearly look to bring forward the projects that were offering the best value in terms of, you know, their negative impact in the early years, their payback period. We keep an eye on the square metre rates for the developments. I think when we did the presentation for all members briefing about this, we shared some information about square metre rates for our own build programme against what we're purchasing from developers. So all of those metrics could be used to take a view between different projects about which ones we wanted to bring forward. So far this programme has been opportunity led really, and each one we've looked at both in isolation and in terms of its impact on the overall plan. And we've only brought forward schemes that in isolation were viable and worked over their lifetime. But obviously we do also, every unit in the plan, every new unit gets plugged into the plan for the whole stock. So that impact is also assessed across the whole portfolio, if that answers your question. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this all night, couldn't we? You know, I'd be more than happy for us to meet separately and go through it, or maybe with Clive as well, and just, you know, have a more detailed conversation about how we put it together.
If I may, I think it will be fair with the Cabinet member here as well. So I'll raise a similar sort of comment at Cabinet next week and give Councillor Whitehead the opportunity to respond as well.
Okay, any further questions? Just a quick one from me. I think I've raised this sort of thing before. It's again, it's a developer that's coming to the council because they're unable to secure people for their affordable house. How many houses at Spitfire Green have Barrett's David Wilson offloaded to other providers, or is it purely Thanet Council?
None. So they were just about to go into contract with Hyde, and then Hyde dropped out, which is why we stepped in on phase one. But they're not. No one else has made any offers.
Okay, that's fair enough. And how many more do they have that they need to offload?
We're doing phase 1, 2 and 3 at Spitfire Green, and we're also doing Tothill Street at Minster, which is their other one. That's the only ones they've got at the moment.
It's good. I mean, I think we've got to be thankful they're not offloading to London councils, etc. I think it's good that we can, if we can, that we buy them up. Councillor Wing?
That does raise a question that's come into my head, which is constantly asked by residents, is do we know who's buying our houses? I mean, the developers have got control on who they sell them to. So it's a question that I'm constantly asked. Why don't the council know who these houses are being sold to? All we can say is we're buying some of them. But it really is, really would be interesting, because we all think our numbers are inflated, and we all know that the cost of new houses is inflated because of new developments, which is really annoying. And some evidence of who's buying these, because it would evidence that the numbers we've been given are not the numbers we need.
So we know who's buying the discounted market sale units from Barrett's, because they need our approval for them. So they are Thanet residents. And like you say, we don't have any control over who buys the rest of them. You know, people can move around. People move to different towns and etc. But the feedback from Barrett's is it is generally local people. I know a lot of people that live up there, a lot of younger people. So yeah. There is no big London. I've heard the London Borough every single time, every development. There is no big London Borough buying a big chunk. Barrett's would never do that. We're working really well with Barrett's. Bob was at a government roundtable this week. You know, Barrett's gave us a shout out. They're trying to work with Canterbury like they do with us. It's not working quite so easily for them. So we've got a really good relationship. They wouldn't do that to us.
So can we ask the buy one, get one free?
I'll try my best.
All right, okay. So we've all had a little chat, so I presume there's no recommendations to send off to Cabinet. We're all happy and agree to that report, so we're all happy to note it. Okay, thank you, Ashley. Moving on to item 8, TDC electrical and gas supply tender. Call on Matt to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is being brought as it represents a key decision. It's for the supply of gas and electricity for our maximum demand sites for a 4-year period, along with approval to move 246 sites currently supplied with electricity under a fixed-term, fixed-price contract to a new flexible contract for a 4-year period, and covers our main operational sites as well as the authority's housing portfolio. These sites represent an 8.3 million contract over this period. The most significant element of change in this report is to move away from the current provider. 100% renewable energy is an energy system where all energy use is sourced from renewable energy sources. The endeavour is to use 100% renewable energy for electricity, heating, cooling and transport is motivated by global warming, pollution and other environmental issues, as well as economic and energy security concerns. The best green energy providers offer 100% green electricity sourced from wind, solar and hydro power. The first place supplier in this framework uses REGOs to maintain the ability to report electricity consumption as 100% green. REGOs are renewable energy guarantees of origin, and these certificates provide evidence that a specific amount of electricity has been generated from renewable sources. npower match the power we consume by securing the corresponding number of REGO certificates, which are usually issued for each megawatt hour of renewable generation fed into the UK electricity system. The recommendation as presented are that Overview and Scrutiny Panel is asked to comment on the report and review the following recommendations being put forward to Cabinet, which is to agree the letting of the contract for electricity and gas supply services as laid out in the report, and 2, to agree the option as written, which is to accept npower for the supply of electricity under the framework, along with Total Energies for the supply of gas under the other framework, including the transfer of the 246 sites to this new framework for electricity. This option includes the fully managed service as well as a bureau service from Laser. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Members? Well.
Sorry, just a quick question. When we set the budget for this year, what did we assume we were going to do with this area? Did we assume that there would be cost reduction? So is the decision in some ways already made for us because we've already set the budget? Or is there environments potentially going to be happening?
They weren't assumed in the budget process because up until the point where we went through the framework, we wouldn't have known what the reductions or the potential of reductions would be. So in theory, where we've been running for a period of time at increased costs, we've been having to manage that in year. So at the moment, I would envisage this effectively having a neutral impact. So although there's a reduction in demand in terms of cost, it doesn't necessarily translate to a reduction in budget that we could put forward as part of the budget process, if that makes sense.
What about in future years? Do you anticipate there being, or is it you're expecting it would be flat? Or do you not want to comment yet?
I don't really want to comment. Because it's a variable contract, it has the capacity to reduce over a period of time. I've got no inclination at the moment or indication as to what that might be. I certainly couldn't build something in from a budget perspective in terms of assumed reductions because there's no evidence to support it at the moment. So.
Councillor Packman?
Now, this is like me taking my current employment and bringing it into this kind of area of knowledge, maybe, around social value. What social value do we get out of this contract to Empower? So what do we get in return? Because I'm all about, yes, getting the best money for our taxpayers. What do they give us in return in social value? Or, if any?
It's difficult to quantify, but obviously the vast majority of the sites that are included this, so when you talk about social value, the vast majority of sites included in this contract are our housing stock. So the lower the charges are for our utilities levied, the lower the cost is to the residents, the better quality of life, so on and so forth. So that's how I would quantify the majority of social value as of regards to this contract.
Sorry, Chair, just to go back. And I think it comes back to a previous conversation we had in another meeting with Bob and the housing team around, you know, I think we need to really pinpoint the social value we get, because I think that's a really good selling point for the council to go back to our residents and taxpayers and say, look, we're investing your money wisely because in return we're getting this, and this is how we break it down. So I think it's a really good PR perspective for TDC because we do get really good social value. I just don't think we know how to sell it to the residents.
Noted.
Councillor Wing?
Are those potential savings passed over to our other leaseholders? So I'm thinking of people who have cafes or the boat owners who obviously use electricity on the harbour? And how do we tell all the people that we charge electricity for that this change has happened?
There's no expectation of reporting that the change has happened. There'd be notional savings that are generated through it. The port as an example, or the harbour as an example, in terms of how those costs are passed on. Obviously, there's been a rollout and a continued rollout of the meter max system, which allows for more accurate charging. Historically, the charges were based on a calculation. Moving forward, as meter max rolls out, it will be based on the actual consumption. So the benefit of somebody at the harbour is they will be paying exactly what the prices are per that agreement. So if that makes sense, it washes through automatically. The rest of it, I suppose, comes into the other point that was made by the previous councillor in terms of the residents of Thanet would see that as part of their charges. With regards to commercial, not all commercial sites are included within this contract. There are very specific sites that are included. So if you're talking about cafes and stuff, they are not necessarily part of it. And also, unless they would have their own, if it's a cafe, for example, they would be in their own contract for utilities, wouldn't be provided through us, if that makes sense.
Anybody else? Councillor Austin.
Just looking for something that I thought I'd spotted earlier and now I can't find it, so I'm going to be talking nonsense, I suspect. I was concerned on the figures to note that we seem to be spending the best part of £200,000 on the ferry terminal without it being largely operational. I'm just wondering what we're expecting in terms of how that's going to develop.
It's not necessarily the consumption of the ferry terminal, it's what we've got classed under terminal within the charges for the port. So there'll be wider costs associated with the port operation, not just the terminal. It will be that the main meter is probably based at the terminal and then there's potential spin-offs from there. So that isn't the cost of the terminal consumption, it's the cost of utilities at the port more widely, yeah.
Okay. Okay, the recommendations that we're asked to look at is to agree to letting of the contracts for the electricity and gas supply services as laid out in the report, and that is to agree to option 1 in the recommendation. So if you section 4, there's a number of other options, but we're asked to agree to option 1. Do you all agree? Okay, excellent, thank you, and thank you, Matt. Moving on to item 9, which is the review of the overview and scrutiny work programme for 24-25. So at the main meeting, the panel requested that Democratic Services draft a protocol for establishing working parties that can be used for a consistent approach when setting up subgroups. That is in Annex 4. Do we have anything to say on that, Councillor Scobie?
Can I just say I massively welcome this because I think it just helps give clarity. I do have a question about how things get onto the matrix in the first place. So we'll come on to that. Okay, that's fine.
So it's not actually in my, but yeah, I think Annex 2 is about, and I think it's something that Councillor Wing brings up a lot, about the scoring matrix. Do you want to look at that now? No? It's not in there, but...
No, it's not in there. It's not in there. No, you can't make up.
That's part of the work programme, isn't it? To look at Annex 2.
If you want us to look at the scoring matrix, then that would be a separate piece of work. I don't think it's a particularly great idea to try and change it on the fly, for want of a better phrase.
Okay, well, maybe we look at that as a separate
agenda. If you want to do that as a future, that's
okay.
absolutely fine, yeah.
Well, we'll look at that at the next meeting for you. Okay, and also... at the same meeting, members also agreed in principle to the draft terms of reference for the external grant fund working party and requested that the item be brought back in written form to the panel for the final approval, and that is Annex 5. So we should all look at this. Please do.
The business about the review topics and the scoring matrix, we started with that at the beginning of this council and raised concerns that the scoring matrix kept us much more limited in the scope of what we could look at in comparison with what the induction training that we just had about scrutiny told us we should be doing. So that was why we asked for a review to happen of the scoring matrix. Obviously we can't do that now, that is a piece of work, but can I strongly recommend that that piece of work is undertaken, because we're now more than a year in and we're still working on an old scoring matrix that appears to me and to certain other members of the panel to be unnecessarily limiting.
Okay,
Thank you.
I will make sure on July meeting that's an agenda item that we discuss that. And so, moving on back to my...
Because the monitoring officer sent us a government update paper.
I'm going to come on to that. I was going to
All
come on
right.
to that in just a second, because I know that you sent an email about that.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, we obviously can't talk about the matrix. Like we can't talk about how the matrix is set up. But at some point in this agenda item, in a minute, can we talk about the matters that are actually in the matrix? Thank you. I'll come back to that then.
Going back to what I was saying, but so the grant funding review working party terms of reference that we should all have, and members of the working group discussed it at the last meeting, and we all agreed that this was the wording. So we're all happy where we're going with that. Yeah, we all get Councillor Scobie.
I just had one question. I can't remember what we agreed at the working party when we were going to report back. Was it October? Charles, can you remember? Yeah, can we have that minuted as well? Because I think, again, as part of the...
that we're working towards a September
yeah,
date.
because that's not in the terms
Yeah.
of reference, nor should it necessarily be, but that's the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And, yes, I wanted to pick up on your email that you sent, and that was to do with the government guidelines, because Ingrid did say she was going to send us an email outlining the changes that we should be aware of, and I don't think that's happened. So did you want me to put that as agenda item for the next meeting?
Well, I'd like it to your one's on and mine's. There is certainly in the overview and scrutiny training, I think there are some clashes with what we were told in overview and scrutiny and what we can actually call in here. So I'd actually welcome, as we have with planning and licensing, that the monitoring officer brings forward that those new government bit in the new legislation, the guidelines, and that we have a training session updating us on that, which does enable us to ask the monitoring officer some of the issues that we do have. Because I know we've been told in here there are certain things we can't call in. The last thing we called in got rejected, we don't understand why. Emails going backwards and forwards trying to justify our positions is not the way to go. I do think we need some further training based on those changes.
Yeah, I mean, Ingrid did, Councillor Green and myself, we've been briefed why the reasons. I mean, I'm not whether we agree with the reasons or not. I mean, we have been told the reasons that she made that decision upon, but that's her decision. I mean, we can't. She's the one that knows the Constitution inside out. Not.
Which means we
Sorry?
don't, so we have training.
I think this 24. I think it's 24th of July. We have overview and scrutiny training again, so maybe we can discuss it there. Maybe that's the time and date to discuss the changes.
We can definitely add that in on the 24th session. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just like to back up what Becky or Councillor Wings just said, and Tricia, because we were told our brief is anything that affects the community or the people in it. We've tried to raise an issue over something that there's not satisfactory evidence on, and we're being denied that right. So I'd like some clarity at some training, please.
At that 24, is there two sessions or one session?
There's two sessions.
On the same day?
I'm not sure.
Councillor Scobie, sorry.
And just to provide some balance on that, I personally think if we have the Constitution that says, and the Local Government Act that says that on decisions on call-in, that first of all that it has to be for an extraordinary circumstances. That's what our Constitution says, and that it's in the judgment of the monitoring officer. I'm not sure it's a good idea for us as politicians, and nobody said that so far. But I do want to, in the future, if they make a decision, we need to support our officers. I think Ingrid is an excellent officer, and if in her judgment she's made that decision. I do agree training's good, but that's not training so we can challenge that. There's nothing in the Constitution to challenge the decision of the monitoring officer, the same way you can't around submitting motions or questions, and nor should there be. There shouldn't be political decisions in that. So I just wanted to make that point. And if people are unhappy about that in the Constitution, then bring it to constitutional review and we will discuss it to death, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, nobody's denying that it was the right or wrong decision. It was her decision, and we haven't argued that. We've questioned it, and then.
We don't understand that.
So on the 24th, we'll make sure we get it in some clarity on what we're allowed to do. In there. Councillor Green.
Yeah, I've had extensive correspondence with Ingrid, and I've come to the conclusion that she is interpreting the Constitution correctly, but I don't agree with the Constitution.
That's exactly what as I said, whether you agree with it or not, we have to go with the officer's decision. She's the experience and the professional person. Okay, so any further comments on the work programme?
So coming new to overview and scrutiny, I mean, that's what caused a little bit of head scratching the last meeting. Looking at what's on the list of topics before, I don't understand some of the rationale behind it. So one of the things I was going to ask, when we talk about the scoring matrix and it's going to be reviewed potentially in July, we've just recently made a change at Constitutional Review where previously only the leader or I think Democratic Services could put something on the agenda. And we've now done it, that the committee can put its own suggestions on the agenda. So there may be matters we want to cover. But in our first meeting, we quickly realised it could just become lots of backbench councillors come up with ideas, and then you have a list that's gone forward. Everyone's just gone, oh yeah, let's talk about these things. And then officers take that away and start prioritising. And at no point have we done like a sift of what should be on there and shouldn't be on there. And it feels like, to me, that's maybe what's happened with the matrix. The people have suggested ideas. I think there's particularly one. I'm assuming, I may just be completely slandering you, Councillor Davis. There's one about berths 4 and 5, which I'm assuming is yours, but which obviously I think you've asked. This may be from like a year ago. Yeah, okay. Apologies for not. I haven't slandered you this time. That I don't really understand the basis of, and so my suggestion was that at the next meeting, can we potentially start with a blank piece of paper? And there's clearly things that should come across that people are concerned about. There's clearly stuff we want to, but can we start with a blank sheet of paper? And I feel like anything that does go on here has to have the majority support of the committee as an area you want to look at, and then it can go through the scoring system. Otherwise, the scoring system at the moment, and it's something we'll discuss at the next meeting, one of the scores is time on the list. So you could have something that's a low priority, but just by virtue of not being prioritised, suddenly, albeit a lower score, it could actually end up on there. So I just think for the next meeting we can start with a blank sheet of paper, and in which case all the other points I was going to make about what we could add, I could let everybody finish early. And yeah, I mean, we were tonight on the list was a cabinet presentation from the leader about the port, but obviously because of Purda and the election, that's going to be in for the July meeting because we're in Purda. And moving on to our next point was we need suggestions for further, can I just finish? Further cabinet presentations, because we need to now line up our meetings because they're coming thick and fast. So if you have any presentations you want from a cabinet member, you need to sound out now for August meeting.
However, I'd like to come back and again, playing tennis with Councillor Scobie, I don't think we need to start with a blank sheet of paper because there are items that have been patiently waiting to come forward in the matrix. A blank sheet devalues everything that we've done over the last year. What we need to do is perhaps have a discussion about them, and the reason ones like 4 and 5 are still sitting on there is because 4 and 5 are still not closed in the accounts. So, and the question there was about emergency decision making. It may not have come to the fore yet, but the question still stands as it did 12 months ago.
Okay, so as I say, the leader will be here at the July meeting to answer all questions port-related.
Emergency decisions of any nature I was asking about. It was, the example was berths 4 and 5.
Okay. I mean, we have worked through a lot of subjects, you know, in such a short time. So it's not like we were a bit slow, but
we don't need those long-termers dropping off the bottom either.
I think we have to remember that sometimes what we think is not important in another ward, and it shouldn't be that way, but there are some major things in certain wards that are more problematic, that just because we don't think it's important, that we should, I think, respect the fact that a number of other councillors do think it's important. I mean, one of the key regions of Thanet that I think is very underrepresented just because of its size and the representation is the villages. There is a crime problem in the villages, but none of us really look at that because we're all in urban areas, and we see our own urban crime every day. So I think we need to accept that and berth 4, 5 still, there is a lot of work to be done on berth 4 and 5, possibly a conveyor going on. What happens if the conveyor breaks the berth? Who's responsible for a new berth? I hope it's not the people of Thanet again. So there are questions that need answering.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Scoving.
Yeah, my point here is, under the current scoring matrix, issues that are people's concerns that are on there by virtue of being on there a long time gain points. And my personal view, and I'm one member of this committee, have different things I would like to focus on. And what needs to happen to decide which people's priorities go on is that a majority of people, or hopefully everybody, agrees that should be a topic that we should look at. Then it can go away and score. That does not happen if everything goes on there and then it's independently done. And so that is why I think we should, in some ways, start afresh. And there are clearly, the majority of them will come over, I think. But there are things that I feel very passionately about, like cost of living, homelessness, the state of our assets, that I think should be on there, and I think would score very highly. And I think that we would, for example, if the Cabinet and the Council do not get on top of some of the costs relating to homelessness, not only is that social damage done to people who are living here, it could bankrupt the Council. And the idea that we could go away and actually do some work on this and give an alternative idea, for me, in my personal view, is something really, really positive that we could do. Some of the matters on here may be priorities for individual members, but if you can't convince 7 other people on this committee to vote with you and agree, they shouldn't be a prioritised area that we should be looking at. And that's my point. That's what democracy is, not everybody getting to put everything into it and then independently looked at. You have to get a majority.
Okay. Quick one, Councillor.
I agree. I mean, the matrix needs to become a working document because then if a meeting, an issue comes up and it scores highly on the risk assessment, it jumps the queue. It jumps ahead of everything else if it scores high on there. So we shouldn't be just looking at the matrix as a list of things we need to plough through. We need to triage the things on the list, and we mustn't be fixated with, well, this is what we've got, we can't add anything else until we've done it. That's totally wrong. As issues come in, they sort of get scored like the nurse would on A&E, and if it's serious enough, it comes to the top of the list and it's the next item on the agenda. So I don't think it's a complicated issue. I think it needs tweaking, that's all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want to keep going round in circles about the matrix because we're going to discuss it in detail. Councillor Green.
Got to remember that we've got 3 ways of bringing things forward. There's setting up a working party, there's calling for an officer report, and there's calling for a cabinet member to talk about something.
Yeah, exactly that. So which is going to bring me on to the next point. So we need a cabinet presentation suggestion for August.
I think at the last meeting we actually agreed one for this meeting or July already. So I think that was minuted and agreed, yeah.
That's for July.
Okay, can we check, because it's in the minutes, shouldn't it?
Yeah, the one that was supposed to be scheduled for this meeting was the leader coming along to talk about the progress against the corporate plan. But because the service planning programme is still underway, it's still to be completed. Once that's been completed, then it's a more useful use of members and the leaders' time to come back when the service planning is completed, because that's going to give you a better answer than as it is at the moment, if that makes sense. So we would push that one back to September time, I think, is the... September?
It is September, but
yeah. Yeah. Yes, so we're asking to come back in September.
So for clarity, just again, new to this committee, so that the leaders coming in September, it makes sense. I mean, this is your call, Chair, when they come. But the leaders also coming next month to talk about the port, did we say? Is that what...
I'm not aware of a suggestion.
I don't remember the corporate report. I don't remember that was
No.
someone...
Yeah, so my suggestion was like at the last meeting, and just for your benefit, just my suggestion was that, you know, we should initially be focusing on, because it's a year since, you know, the new administration's been in, it'd be really good to get an overview, and then from there that might be helpful strategically to look at the priorities and areas where there might be challenges that we could look for further information. That might be a good place to start, and if it's September, that sounds good, because that sort of ties in with when one working party finishes. So if Councillor Everett comes along and we hear him say something we disagree, we can instantly set up a working party.
For a cabinet presentation.
I'm glad Bob's here. I think one of, because we need to ask, we need, you should have gone, we need to ask Bob whether it's possible, because I think one of the areas that I certainly feel we need more information about is estates. And I know when they last came here, you were gonna sort out some P whatever they are, that's gone straight on my head, some, you know, some standard performance guidelines,
Performance indicators.
KPIs, sorry, dyslexic. And, you know, and what I'd also like to look at is whether we've reflected on some of the assets we've sold. I won't mention the Western Undercliff Cafe, now up for sale for 1.1 million, and the Westcliff Hall that is unsold on Savills auction site. Where you know, we need to learn by some of the things we do, all of us, and it would be interesting to see if the PKIs are in there, and whether we've moved pay whatever they are, and whether we reflect on some of the assets we've sold to better inform the potential selling of assets going forward. I think we have, because you see different things happening with certain assets in Margate, which is good.
Chair, I'm not sure if that's a question, but I'm happy to respond if you would like me to.
I think what I'm saying is I'd like estates back, but I'd like estates to come back when there's been some progress, rather than just a bit dragging them back.
I'm not sure which cabinet member that would be. That Councillor Duckworth. So do we want to ask Councillor Duckworth? We had Councillor Duckworth here already recently, so I think maybe put her in for August, maybe, for that, for the assets.
I mean, Andrea giving us that information was incredibly useful, because it plugged a lot of holes that we're not aware of.
Well, yeah, a couple of comments. So, firstly, on service KPIs. So, we are currently going through a service planning process across the whole council, and every service area is preparing a service plan. And one of the tasks for that piece of work is to introduce new key performance indicators for every service. Andrea and I have spent quite a lot of time talking about KPIs for property portfolio. And the sort of things that we want to bring forward are rent yield across the commercial portfolio, so you can see how it's performing, information about the condition of our buildings across the portfolio, and about our statutory compliance. So we're working on those. They will be within those service plans, and those key ones will be part of the corporate performance reporting suite that you'll see here, and will also go to Cabinet. The other thing I thought it's worth saying is that our new project management framework includes post-project review processes, so that we can learn from mistakes of project delivery, and which would include key property projects. And actually, some of the more recent disposals have been much more successful, like the Granville Theatre, that has been a much more successful disposal than some of the earlier ones. And you know, the Westcliff Hall is a good example of where things haven't gone so well, and we still need to be involved in that. So I think we're really keen to learn from those, and also to bring that performance information forward so you can see it. We are close to completing a fairly comprehensive condition survey across the stock, which we're going to use to put together a planned maintenance programme for property portfolio. And when we've got that, and we've got those proposals, I think that might be a good time for you to have a look at what we're thinking.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, I'll come back to you in a second.
With regard to the updates we're supposed to be getting, we were promised regular updates on levelling up, which don't appear to be happening, and this is now the second or third meeting that we didn't get the agreed update. Given the difficulty we've been having regarding a certain other partnership board and getting a discussion on it, I'd like to see some updates on levelling up and what is or isn't happening, given the amount of the lack of progress on many of the original proposals.
Mr. Porter, can you add anything to that?
I think in fairness, I think you gave quite a big update on that last meeting, but yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, it feels like we're doing this the wrong way around a little bit. Like, if we're going to set out our priorities at the next meeting and then set up a matrix where officers are going to take away and score that, I'm not sure rushing to invite somebody midway through, if the service plans are still being developed against the corporate plan, you're going to bring people in halfway through, and bearing in mind officers, particularly senior officers, are going to be dealing with the election, and then you've got August and we've got the leader coming in September. Surely it would make sense to just have a bit of a breather. Slight story, I used to report into a board and they would constantly ask me for more reports and, oh yeah, have a look at that and can you write a report on that, until my job just became writing reports for the board. And I think we've got to be careful that when there's a busy period and there's a holiday period as well, that we maybe just make our next big presentation, the leader with the corporate plan, give time to look at our priorities, and then we can set out some work from there. I feel like anything else is just going to be a little bit shooting from the hip, and I certainly wouldn't be in favour of doing anything unless there's something particularly poignant that somebody's got.
It's just kind of stole my thunder, really, was can we not move this to after July's meeting where we can actually put a schedule of speakers in place? Once we have kind of, not a blank sheet, Councillor Davis, I promise, but a new sheet of priorities.
I like that.
Could I just raise a concern about the impact of our work in terms of having had a number of working parties working on various things? Some of those things have gone to Cabinet and resulted in action. Some of them have gone to Cabinet and resulted in nothing very much. And obviously some of that was about changes in leadership, and we've had a change of council in the meanwhile. We've had our most recent report chaired by Councillor Britcher, which managed to get to the pages of the Sun, and as a result, one tiny suggestion which was vaguely floated and which had gone past CMT, Comms and everybody and Cabinet and not been picked up as a hostage to fortune, has totally outbalanced everything else, all the really good, useful stuff that was in that report. We understand that Councillor Duckworth is taking it away and is going to respond, but we still haven't had responses on the, the coastal waste one, for example, which fell between two administrations. If we're going to put all this work in, we really should have a better schedule, a better plan for how we want Cabinet to respond, how we're going to ask them to respond to us, and how we then communicate to the rest of the Council and the public what the impact of that work is. Otherwise, we're putting an awful lot of hours in for not very much real impact, which I think is a great disappointment in view of the amount of work and the good ideas that have come through from a number of the Working Party reports. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I mean a lot of things from the coastal waste thing, they have been implemented, or slightly in some interpretation. And going back to the Councillor Curry chaired on the collaboration, this last couple of weeks, the parish forums have started, and Penny is the appointed officer, and things are moving there, so not completely ignored, but yeah, it's a loose thing. Yeah. I'll take that on board. Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, I was just going to suggest for October or November, if we invite Councillor Christian Brighton as obviously the newest member of Cabinet, who won't have made a report to this committee before. So I think October or November will have given him enough time after coming in.
I was going to suggest him for August, to be honest, but it's
well, I was just going to say, Chair, we're about to do a big public consultation around parking, aren't we? And right in the so it might actually this is where lining these things up. Like, do you want to bring a Cabinet member to tell you, "Oh, these are my priorities. This is how I feel," or when they've actually got something, this is what I'm going to do, is my thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, what is the specific question that you'd like?
Well, it was about cabinet presentations, but I think we're going to just put a hold on it for the summer and then start in September.
And just can I give, just from another committee in the council, we had a similar problem with internal audit recommendations coming forward, and then because our meetings are every 3 months, once the repeat audit is done, what happens to those recommendations that are medium or low? And what we did is we asked officers once or twice a year to produce a report of those recommendations and how they're working on it. So a suggestion might be that maybe not every meeting, but like throughout the year, we receive an update from officers on reports that we've submitted from working parties and how they're progressing. That might just be a really good way of capturing that. So people know that it's there. Yeah, and it's, maybe Mr. Hughes thinks that's going to be a huge administrative burden, but hopefully not.
No. Part of the work that we did over the previous couple of meetings, where we've made it the case that where in the past we've made suggestions to overview and scrutiny, the reason why we are asking you to make formal recommendations is because Cabinet are obliged in law to come back and tell you what they did. So as we have now got a recommendation from this meeting, which is regarding the thing that Councillor Green raised earlier on.
Don't ask about the wording.
Sorry, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Councillor Austin. Yes, it's been a long night. But the next work programme report will detail whether or not Cabinet took that point on board. So that's how we will make sure that the panel is updated as to what Cabinet has responded to their recommendation, whether they took it on board and they did what you asked, or whether they didn't, and if they didn't, why they didn't do that. Because that's the other thing they have to say. They're obliged to say why they're not doing what you asked them to do.
And if I may just on that, the difficulty will be in when there's 30 recommendations and they're all long-term stuff, and they say, yes, it's very interesting, we will definitely consider those things. How long do you keep on a list for? Because you could get quite a bit, and that's I think the risk with that. And where it wasn't with like internal audit recommendations, some of them were on there for years, but eventually somebody makes a decision on that, and I think that's maybe the bit that we're going to have to get used to, which is if Cabinet can't implement that, they probably just say, no, we can't for these reasons, rather than saying, thank you very much, Scrutiny. We really appreciate all the work you've done. We're going to go and put it on this pile over here that we'll get to when we can.
And I think David Green's going to make that point.
Regarding the levelling up projects that were mentioned earlier, I think I raised it at the last meeting. Bob, I think it was, told us about the project management system that we had a members' briefing on.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
And I was content that would make reporting on those projects easier, less resource intensive for the officers. So I hope when that, I hope that's progressing and it will make it easier for you.
Well, yeah, we have that, and we just are doing a couple of last-minute tweaks to those processes, and then we're going to be having a formal launch with the officers across the organisation to get that into use. And the projects, any new projects that come forward for consideration in the coming budget round, will all go through that process right from the outset. So, we're very close to launching that.
Okay, so getting back to our original conversation, so we were talking about the grant funding review working party terms of reference we agreed on. And then we got sidetracked, so I just want to come back to Councillor Austin to see if she's got any updates for the rest of the committee on that project.
Thank you, Chair. We had an initial meeting with officers. The prize for effort beyond the call of duty goes to Councillor Manners, who joined us from his hospital bed online. And what we got some great
useful information from officers and some very encouraging stuff that's going on. And we've had a lot of helpful information since about organisations we might wish to speak with. We have decided to defer our next meeting until after the local elections, for the general election, I should say, for obvious reasons. But we plan a couple of meetings in fairly quick succession, one to talk to infrastructure and support organisations who help bring funding into the area, and one to talk with voluntary organisations themselves. And the regeneration team have been very helpful in sending out an email even this evening, I believe, to voluntary organisations to let them know that we'll be wanting to talk to them. So we are awaiting some further information on that, and Charles will be putting together some potential dates for those meetings later in July.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. And members, questions? No? All happy? Good. Right, moving on to item number 10, the forward plan and exempt cabinet reports list. Unless there's something from the plan that the panel wish to consider, members are asked to note the report. Thank you. And that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed, and thank you all for attending.